Don't argue with my wife in her house, my son roared, jabbing a finger at my face in the very kitchen where I'd laid every tile with my own cracked hands. My daughter-in-law stood there with her arms crossed, a triumphant smirk on her lips, watching as my own flesh and blood humiliated me in front of her. I stepped back, my heart going numb in that instant. I didn't shed another tear. I quietly changed every lock in the house, each little click like a silent oath that no one would cross this threshold without my say-so again. In less than an hour, the pounding and screaming started. My son lost control, shouting my name in desperation. My daughter-in-law sobbed, hurled her phone, and in the middle of the night there was nothing left but endless pleading. I sat in the dark, a cold cup of tea in my hand, listening to each knock on the door as if it were rapping on my own past. The house was silent, save for the tick of an old clock and the patter of rain on the eaves. I've lived in this house for 30 years. Every brick underfoot, every brush stroke on the walls, every hint of apple pie in the kitchen holds a lifetime's breath. And now this very place has become where I was shamed by the son I raised. If you're still with me, if this story stirs something in you, drop a comment below. I want to know where you're watching from and what you think. Every one of your comments means something to me. My name is Loretta Wynn. I'm 69 years old, a widow living in the suburbs of Richmond, Virginia. My late husband, Calvin, and I built this house together. Every brick, every nail, every ounce of sweat went into this place. We weren't rich, but we made this house our home with love and hard work. Calvin always told me, Loretta, this house will be your legacy. If I'm ever gone, you'll still have a place to come home to. I believed that for half my life, and for a long time, it was true. I remember every moment. The first bricks Calvin set by sunset light, the nights I stayed up mending clothes to make sure we had enough money for materials, the warmth in the kitchen when Calvin would come home tired, but happy. We weren't wealthy, but we were rich in memories and hard work. When Calvin died in a work accident, I promised myself that this house, this home, would never leave me. I was determined to keep it, to live in it, and to hold on to the life we'd built together. But now all those years of effort felt like they were slipping away with one cruel sentence. Don't argue with my wife in her house. That kitchen where Darren had just shouted those words used to be the place where we celebrated his first birthday. He'd sit on the counter, his little legs swinging, waiting for me to take the cake out of the oven. Mom, he'd say back then, when I'm big, I'll build you a really big kitchen. But now here he was, telling me I had no rights in my own home. Rebecca, my daughter-in-law, had come into our lives 3 years ago, and since she stepped in, everything started to change. She said the wall paint was too gloomy, the curtains too old-fashioned, and the photos of me and Calvin didn't fit her vision for the house. At first, I thought she was just trying to help, but I quickly realized it wasn't about helping. It was about taking over. She replaced all the furniture. She moved the family photos and put up their wedding pictures. She invited her friends over for parties, and I was left alone, sitting in my room, listening to the laughter echo through the house. I stayed quiet. I thought silence would bring peace. But silence, in the face of disrespect, isn't kindness. It's handing someone the right to hurt you. That morning, it started with the roses. I had planted those roses 15 years ago, each one a memory of Calvin and me. They were my flowers, my connection to the life we had built here. But Rebecca didn't like them. She said they blocked the view of her coffee machine. When I gently tried to tell her that the roses needed the sun, she shrugged. Then buy new ones. Everything old should be replaced, Mom. Before I could say anything, Darren snapped his newspaper shut and said, Rebecca's right. Stop giving her a hard time. That was the moment it hit me. Just one line. Stop giving her a hard time made me realize something I had been avoiding. I hadn't been treated like the owner of this house for a long time. I was a guest in the home I built. I tried to stay calm. Just ask me first before changing anything, please. But then Darren shouted, Don't argue with my wife in her house. I didn't argue back. I didn't cry. I simply stepped back and took one last look at the kitchen. Every tile, Every cabinet, every inch of this house was a mark of love and hard work. When they left, I pulled out a bundle of old papers wrapped in plastic. The deed to the house, my name printed clearly, Loretta Wynn. I wiped the dust from the corner and laid it flat on the table. It was a reminder that this was my home, my legacy, and no one could take that from me. I called Earl, an old friend of Calvin's, who did locksmith work. "Earl," I said, my voice calm, "can you come over? I want to change all the locks." "Planning to kick someone out?" Earl chuckled over the phone. "No, Earl," I replied. "I'm just taking back my space." When Earl arrived, I held the flashlight while he worked, changing every lock. Front door, back door, shed. Every click of the lock felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. As Earl finished, he turned to me and asked, "Feel better now?" I nodded. "Yes, Earl, I feel lighter." The house was quiet again, and I sat down at the table, a cup of tea in my hand. I looked out the window at the yard. The roses were still there, though now they had been moved to a new corner. Tomorrow, I'd bring them back to their rightful place. For now, though, I sat quietly, feeling a calm I hadn't known in a long time. And just as I began to take a sip of my tea, I heard a car pull up. I knew who it was, but I didn't move. I stayed seated, watching the shadows grow longer outside. The knocking started, first soft, then frantic. "Mom, open the door. What are you doing?" Darren shouted, his voice growing desperate. Rebecca was there too, crying, pleading. The banging got louder, then slower, and then stopped. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I just took a sip of my tea, the bitterness of it grounding me in a way nothing else could. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I just took a sip of my tea, the bitterness of it grounding me in a way nothing else could. The pounding on the door faded into nothingness. The car left the driveway. The house, once filled with the echo of anger and frustration, was silent again. And in that silence, I felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't a victory. It wasn't even relief. It was something deeper, a quiet reclaiming of what had always been mine. This house, this home, had always been mine. The locks had been changed, but the love, the sweat, and the memories that built this place were still here, waiting to be acknowledged. I knew deep down that the battle wasn't over yet, but for the first time in a long time, I felt I was standing on solid ground. I spent the rest of that night in the quiet of my home, with only the tick of the old clock and the occasional rustling of the trees outside to keep me company. The storm had passed, but its traces still lingered in the air, heavy and uncertain. I knew Darren and Rebecca would return, no matter how far they went, no matter how hard they tried to erase me from this place. I wasn't going anywhere. This house was built on a foundation of love and sacrifice, and no one, not even my own son, could take that away from me. The next morning, the sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the room. I woke to the sound of birds outside the window, chirping away as if the world had not been shaken by the events of the previous night. I stood up, stretched, and walked into the kitchen. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, but I didn't want coffee. I wanted something stronger. I needed clarity, not caffeine. I walked past the kitchen, past the hallway, and into the living room, where my eyes were drawn to the old photo of Calvin and me that still hung on the wall. It was the photo that Rebecca had wanted to take down, the one she had called old and tacky, but it remained there just as it had for decades, a symbol of everything I'd fought for, everything I had built with Calvin. I sighed and ran my fingers over the frame. "You see, Calvin? I'm still here," I whispered. I hadn't spoken those words aloud in years, but today they felt right. I wasn't going to let this house be taken from me. I wasn't going to let anyone erase the history of this place, no matter how hard they tried. Just then, the phone rang. I picked it up without hesitation, knowing exactly who it would be. "Mom?" Darren's voice crackled through the receiver, tired and broken. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I just let him speak. "Mom, I'm sorry for last night. I don't know what happened. I don't know how we got here." His words were filled with guilt, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to fix the damage that had already been done. The lines between us had been crossed, and no apology could erase that. "You're sorry?" I asked, my voice calm. "Sorry for what, Darren? For yelling at me in my own home? For siding with your wife when she treated me like a stranger? You're sorry, but does that really change anything?" I could hear him swallowing on the other end of the line, the silence stretching between us like a canyon. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom," he said quietly, his voice full of regret. "But Rebecca, she's not like you. She's different." "Different?" I repeated, my heart aching. "How is she different, Darren? Because she's younger? Because she's more modern? What exactly does different mean when it comes to love and respect?" Darren sighed. "I don't know. I don't know how we got here. I never meant to hurt you." I closed my eyes for a moment, gathering my thoughts. I had to be careful now. I had to be strong but gentle, firm but kind. My son was lost in his own confusion, and he needed to find his way back. But that was his journey, not mine. I wasn't his guide anymore. "I've been patient, Darren," I said, my voice steady. "I've been quiet, thinking that if I just let things go, things would get better. But they haven't. They've gotten worse. And I need to tell you something I've been avoiding for a long time." There was a long pause, but I didn't hesitate. "I've always loved you, Darren. I've always wanted the best for you. But I can't keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not. I won't be your doormat. I won't be the one who gets pushed aside for someone else's convenience. This house, this home, it's mine. And I'm not going to let anyone take that away from me." Another silence followed, but this time it felt different. It felt like he was hearing me, really hearing me for the first time. "I'm not asking you to choose between me and Rebecca," I continued, my heart aching with every word. "But I am asking you to choose respect. I need you to understand that this house was built on love, not on control. And if you want to be part of it, you have to respect that." I could hear him breathing heavily, but he didn't respond. The words had been said, and I could feel the weight of them hanging in the air. "Do you understand what I'm saying, Darren?" I asked, my voice softer now, almost a whisper. He nodded, though I couldn't see it. "Yeah, Mom. I think I do. I'm sorry." "Sorry isn't enough, Darren," I said, my voice firm once more. "Sorry doesn't fix the damage, but I'm willing to let you fix it if you're ready." Another long pause. And then finally he spoke again. "I don't know what to do. I'm lost, Mom. I don't know who I am anymore." "Then take the time to figure it out," I replied, my voice calm but resolute. "But don't come back here until you've figured it out. And when you do, come back as my son, not as someone's puppet. Don't let her pull you around. Stand on your own 2 feet." Darren was quiet for a long time, but I knew he was processing. I knew he needed this space to breathe, to think. He wasn't the man he thought he was yet, but one day he would be. "I'll be here when you're ready," I said, breaking the silence. And just like that, I ended the call. The weight of the conversation lingered, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a small sense of relief. Darren had heard me. He wasn't ready to change, but maybe, just maybe, he was starting to understand. I looked out the window again, watching the wind stir the leaves in the yard. The roses were still there, still blooming, though a little battered by the rain. Tomorrow I would take the time to move them back into the sun. I would tend to them carefully, just as I was beginning to tend to myself. Tomorrow I would take the time to move them back into the sun. I would tend to them carefully, just as I was beginning to tend to myself. The next morning, the air felt fresh with the remnants of the rain. The earth had been nourished, and the plants outside seemed to stretch in the warmth of the first light. I opened the back door and stepped outside, my slippers damp from the dew on the grass. The roses were scattered in the corner behind the garage, untouched but neglected. I had told myself I'd move them back, but seeing them in their new spot, thrown in the shadows like forgotten things, felt wrong. They were mine. They belonged in the sun where they could bloom and grow, not hidden away in the dark. I bent down and gently lifted each pot, one by one, careful not to crush the delicate roots that had struggled without enough light. As I placed them back in their rightful place, near the fence where they could get the most sunlight, I thought about the time I'd spent caring for them. Each pot was more than just a flower bed. It was a story, a memory of Calvin and me. Each rose represented a year of our life together, and now, even in his absence, they still carry the love we built. The morning passed quietly as I tended to the garden. The gentle buzzing of bees and the soft chirping of birds filled the air. It felt peaceful, but there was still an ache in my chest, a quiet reminder that things were far from okay. The storm had passed, but the damage it left behind was still being assessed. I could hear the faint hum of an engine in the distance, and before I even had time to look, I knew who it was. The car slowed as it reached the end of the driveway. It stopped, and I stood up straight, wiping my hands on my apron as I turned to face the front door. Darren. I wasn't sure what to expect. Would he be different? Would he come with an apology that meant something, or would it be just another plea for forgiveness without true change? The uncertainty hung thick in the air as I walked toward the door, my heart hammering in my chest. When I opened it, there he was. My son. His shoulders slumped, his face tired, but his eyes were searching for something he hadn't found yet. Mom, he said softly, his voice hoarse. Can we talk? I nodded, stepping aside to let him in. There was no point making him stand on the porch, not now. I had made my boundaries clear, but this was still my son, and I wasn't going to turn him away without listening to what he had to say. We both sat in the living room, the same room that had once been filled with laughter and now empty but for the two of us. I couldn't help but notice how different it felt. The pictures of Calvin and me were still up, though they had been shifted when Rebecca had redecorated. The old armchair I had sewn many of Darren's clothes in was still there, but it felt like it didn't belong to me anymore. It belonged to the past, the time when things were simple, before all the complications crept in. Darren shifted in his seat, his hands fidgeting in his lap. He didn't look at me directly. Instead, his gaze kept darting around the room, as if he were trying to avoid the conversation we both knew was coming. Mom, he started, his voice thick. I've been thinking about everything. About last night, about everything that led up to that moment. He paused, looking down at his hands. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. And I don't know how to make it right, but I'm trying. I really am. I didn't say anything right away. I needed to hear more from him. His words, though genuine, were just the start. I wanted to know if he was truly seeing what had happened, if he understood what had been lost, and if he was ready to do the hard work of fixing it. After a long silence, I spoke. Darren, I've been patient. I've been silent for so long, thinking that things would get better if I just kept quiet. But they didn't. They got worse. You didn't just hurt me with your words last night. You hurt the history of this house, the memories Calvin and I built here. You treated me like I didn't matter, like this house didn't matter. His eyes welled up, but he didn't cry. He blinked back the tears, nodding slowly. I know, Mom. I know. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to disrespect you. I didn't mean to take away everything you worked for. I could feel the sincerity in his voice, but I wasn't ready to let him off the hook just yet. I needed to hear him say it. You didn't just disrespect me, Darren, I continued. You disrespected the house we built together. You let her come in and erase me from it piece by piece. You let her replace the furniture, the curtains, the photos. This was my home first. This was Calvin and my home. I thought you understood that. But you let someone else take control without even realizing it. Darren finally looked me in the eye, and for the first time in a long time, I saw his pain, his regret. I didn't see it at first, he admitted, his voice shaky. I didn't see what was happening. I was so wrapped up in trying to make her happy, trying to keep the peace, that I didn't see that I was pushing you out. I wasn't thinking about you, Mom. I was only thinking about her. I exhaled slowly, taking in his words. He was getting it. Slowly, but he was getting it. But understanding wasn't enough. Words weren't enough. Action. Action was what mattered now. I stood up, walking to the window and looking out at the yard. The roses were blooming again, strong and resilient, just as I was learning to be. I turned back to Darren. "You're going to have to do more than just apologize, Darren," I said, my voice steady. "You're going to have to prove that you understand. Prove that you respect me, that you respect this house. You've been lost, but you can't just come back here and expect everything to go back to normal. You've got to earn it. You've got to show me that you've learned something from all of this." Darren stood up, his hands clenched at his sides. "I will, Mom. I promise. I'll prove it to you. I'll do whatever it takes. I've been an idiot, but I'll change." I looked at him, my heart heavy but hopeful. "I hope you do. Because this house, this family, it's worth fighting for. As it starts with respect. It starts with you stepping up and making the right choices. And I can't do that for you anymore." Darren nodded again, his eyes brimming with tears. "I'll do better." As he left the house that day, something in me shifted. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had regained a small piece of control. Darren had said the right things, but I knew actions would speak louder than words. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight, but I could see the first flickers of hope. The next few weeks were quiet. Darren kept his distance, as if giving me space, but I could feel him trying. He didn't come back to the house every day like he used to, but when he did, there was a subtle shift in his attitude. He was respectful, careful with his words. And when Rebecca came over, she was different too. The sharpness in her eyes had softened, and though I could still feel the tension between us, there was a certain awkwardness that seemed to be fading. One afternoon, Darren came to the house, his hands filled with bags of groceries. "I thought we could cook together," he said quietly, his voice tentative. "I've been thinking about what you said, and I want to make it right." I raised an eyebrow, unsure of how to respond, but he smiled, an almost sheepish smile. "I've been practicing cooking. I thought I could make dinner for once." I laughed softly, the sound strange after so many weeks of silence. "All right, Darren, you can cook, but you're going to have to listen to me when I tell you to add more salt." He grinned, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like the weight had lifted. Maybe we were moving in the right direction after all. He grinned, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like the weight had lifted. Maybe we were moving in the right direction after all. The smell of dinner started to fill the house. Darren was surprisingly good in the kitchen, surprising because for as long as I could remember, he hadn't shown much interest in cooking. It was always me, always Calvin, making the meals. But now, with Darren handling the stove, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of something that had been missing for a long time: hope. We spent the next hour in the kitchen, cooking together in a way we hadn't in years. I showed him how to chop vegetables the way I used to do it for Calvin, and he laughed when he accidentally spilled some rice on the floor. "Guess I'm not quite the chef yet," he said, his voice filled with humor, not frustration. "You'll get there," I replied, smiling softly. "Just remember to keep your knives sharp and your heart sharper." He nodded, taking the lesson seriously. As we worked, I realized how much I had missed these small, everyday moments. The sound of knives cutting through vegetables, the sizzle of food cooking in the pan, it all felt so familiar, so comforting. But it also felt like something had been broken and was now slowly being fixed, piece by piece. Dinner was a quiet affair. We sat down at the table, the same table where I had eaten countless meals with Calvin, where we'd celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, where our lives had unfolded, one meal at a time. But tonight, something was different. Darren was here, really here. He wasn't just a son sitting at the table. He was a man who had taken responsibility for his actions. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying, and that was enough. Rebecca didn't come over that night. I hadn't expected her to. Things were still tense between us, and I knew that the road to rebuilding trust in her would be just as long, if not longer, than it had been with Darren. But for the first time in a while, I felt a little less burdened. I had seen a crack in Darren's armor, and it had given me a glimpse of the person I hoped he could become. The next few weeks passed in a strange calm. Darren continued to visit, though the visits were infrequent, as if he was giving me space to breathe. I wasn't sure what to make of it, whether he was simply respecting my need for distance or if he was still unsure of how to approach me. But I let him take his time. I wasn't going anywhere, and I wasn't going to rush him. One evening, as I sat in the living room, The sound of a car pulling up startled me from my thoughts. I walked to the door, my heart fluttering in my chest. When I opened it, I wasn't surprised to see Rebecca standing there, looking hesitant, unsure. Her posture was different this time, softer, almost vulnerable. "I brought dinner," she said, her voice tentative. "I thought maybe we could eat together." I looked at her for a moment, weighing my options. I had spent so much time building walls, trying to protect myself from the hurt she had caused. But in that moment, I realized that holding on to that pain wasn't helping anyone. It was only keeping me stuck in the past. "All right," I said, stepping aside to let her in. "But you're going to have to show me how to make your famous salad dressing. I've never been able to get it quite right." Rebecca smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "Deal." We sat down at the table together, the three of us, Darren, Rebecca, and me. The air wasn't perfect, but it was better. It was quieter, more respectful. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't talk about what had happened or who had been wronged. We just ate, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were finally able to share a meal without the weight of unresolved conflict hanging over us. As the meal came to an end, Rebecca looked at me, her eyes steady but full of uncertainty. "Loretta," she began, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. "I know I've hurt you. I know I've disrespected you, and I'm sorry for that. I don't know how to fix it, but I want to try. I want to make things right between us." I could see the sincerity in her eyes. It wasn't the same coldness that had once been there. It wasn't the false sweetness that had masked her true intentions. This was real. And for the first time, I believed her. But believing her didn't mean I was going to let my guard down completely. I needed to see action, not just words. "Rebecca," I said quietly, my voice steady, "I'm not asking you to fix everything overnight. It's going to take time. And I don't expect you to be perfect. But I do expect you to respect me, my home, and my memories. If you can do that, we can rebuild." She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I can do that," she said, her voice trembling. "I want to do that." I didn't say anything more. I didn't need to. We had both said enough. Over the next few days, things continued to shift, albeit slowly. Darren was around more, helping me with chores, fixing things that had been neglected. Rebecca, though she still kept her distance, came over occasionally, offering small gestures of kindness, bringing groceries, helping with the garden. It wasn't perfect and it wasn't easy, but it was progress. I knew that the journey wasn't over. I knew there would be more difficult conversations, more tears, and more hard work. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the right path. One evening, as the sun began to set, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. The air was cool, and the sound of crickets filled the night. It felt peaceful, like the calm after a storm. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a while, I felt hopeful. I heard the sound of footsteps behind me, and when I turned around, I saw Darren walking toward me. He sat down beside me on the swing, his expression thoughtful. "Mom," he said after a long pause, "I've been thinking about everything. About how I treated you, about how I let things get so messed up. I don't know how I got so lost, but I'm trying. I'm really trying to get it right." I reached out and put my hand on his. "I know you are, Darren, and that's all I can ask for." He smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "I'm sorry for making you feel like you didn't matter." "You matter to me, Darren," I said quietly. "You always have. But you have to start respecting yourself too before you can expect anyone else to." He nodded slowly, his eyes distant. "I'm learning, one step at a time." And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. The days that followed felt like the soft, steady rhythm of a life beginning to rebuild itself. The cracks that had formed in our family, the long silences, the sharp words were still there, but they were beginning to fill in with something new. Something fragile, yet hopeful. Respect. I had always thought that peace would come after everything was settled, after all the arguments had been fought and won. But I was wrong. Peace wasn't a destination. It was a process. a quiet decision to move forward, even when the past still haunted the corners of the house. And as I sat on the porch each evening, watching the world move in its slow, predictable way, I realized that peace could grow, just like the roses I had replanted in the garden. It needed time, sunlight, and care. Rebecca and I weren't close yet, not by any means, but I could see the changes in her. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into this house 3 years ago, cold and calculating. She wasn't perfect, and neither was I, but she was trying. And that was enough for now. Darren, too, was different. He had become someone I could respect again. He came by more often, helping me with the things that had been neglected over the years. The creaky door, the loose fence, the leaky tape, small things, but they added up. Every time he came over, I could see him trying. Not just with the house, but with me, with our relationship. It wasn't about grand gestures. It was about showing up day after day with the intention to make things right. One evening, as I sat on the porch, I saw him walking up the driveway, his hands in his pockets, his head down. There was something different in the way he moved now. The weight of his past mistakes wasn't gone, but he wasn't carrying it like a burden anymore. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice casual, but there was a sincerity in it that I hadn't heard in a long time. "I thought I'd help you with the garden today. It's looking good, but I figured I could help you pull some weeds." I smiled, standing up and brushing off my apron. "You want to help me pull weeds?" I'm impressed. "Are you sure you're up for it?" He grinned, a rare, wide smile. "I figure it's the least I can do after everything. And hey, it's just pulling weeds. How hard can it be?" I laughed, handing him the gardening gloves. "We'll see if you still think it's easy after an hour." We worked side by side, pulling weeds from the flower beds, laughing when Darren accidentally tugged a bit too hard and ended up pulling up a whole row of flowers instead of just the weeds. It was a simple moment, but it was one of the most honest moments we'd shared in a long time. As the evening sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the garden, Darren stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. He looked at me, his expression softening. "Mom," he said quietly, "I want you to know that I'm not doing this just because I have to. I'm doing it because I want to. I want to fix things between us. I want to make it right." I nodded, my heart swelling with a quiet pride. "I know, Darren, and that means more to me than you'll ever know." That night, as we sat down for dinner, there was a feeling of calm in the house. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't some magical resolution to everything that had happened. But it was real. We were working through our differences, one small step at a time. Rebecca came over too, bringing dessert. It was a simple gesture, but it meant something. We all sat at the table together, the three of us, in the very place where so much had gone wrong. And yet, in that moment, it felt right. There was no shouting, no anger, just the quiet hum of a family beginning to heal. I looked around the table at my son and daughter-in-law, both of them looking at me with soft eyes, as if seeing me for the first time in a long time. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly part of this family again, not just a relic of the past, but a living, breathing presence in their lives. "Mom," Rebecca said, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about respect. And I think I've been wrong. I've tried so hard to control everything, to make it all fit into this perfect image. But that's not what a family is about. A family is about love and respect. And I want to try to be better. For you, for Darren, for me." I felt the weight of her words sink into me, and for the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, she was telling the truth. I appreciate that, Rebecca. I really do. But respect isn't something that just happens overnight. It's something you have to keep working at every day. She nodded. "I know, and I'm willing to work at it." The evening passed quietly, with small talk and laughter. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. We weren't fixed. We weren't whole yet, but we were on our way. The days that followed were filled with small moments of change. Darren and Rebecca continued to visit, and the tension between us began to ease. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of discomfort, moments where the past threatened to creep back into our conversations. But each time that happened, we worked through it. We didn't let it fester. We talked, we listened, we apologized, and we moved on. One afternoon, as I sat in the living room, I heard a knock on the door. I got up to answer it, wondering who it could be at this hour. When I opened it, I saw Rebecca standing there, a small, tentative smile on her face. "Hi, Loretta," she said softly, holding out a small box. I I brought something for you." I raised an eyebrow, surprised but not suspicious. "What's this?" "Just a little something," she said, her voice unsure. I thought maybe we could start fresh, you know? I took the box from her and opened it. Inside was a small photo frame with a picture of Calvin and me from the early days of our marriage. I hadn't seen that picture in years. It was the one that had once sat on the mantel until Rebecca had replaced it with a picture of her and Aaron. "I thought maybe we could put this back where it belongs," she said quietly. My heart swelled with emotion as I looked at the photo. It wasn't just the picture of Calvin and me. It was a symbol of everything we had built, everything we had lost, and everything we were working to rebuild. I smiled at Rebecca, the first real smile I had given her in a long time. "Thank you, Rebecca. This means a lot." She nodded, her eyes softening. "I know it's not enough, but it's a start." Over the next few weeks, our family continued to rebuild step by step. The changes weren't dramatic, but they were real. Aaron found a new job, one he was proud of, and Rebecca started working on her own personal goals, focusing less on trying to control everything around her and more on her own growth. It wasn't easy for either of them, but they were trying. And I was trying too. I was learning to let go of the past, to stop holding on to the hurt and the anger that had once clouded my heart. I was learning to forgive, not just them, but myself as well. One evening, as I sat on the porch, looking out at the garden, I felt a peace that I hadn't felt in years. The roses were in full bloom now, their bright colors a reminder that life goes on, even after the darkest storms. Darren came out and sat beside me, his eyes thoughtful. "Mom," he said softly, "I know it's been a long road, but I think we're getting there. I think we're finally starting to find our way back to each other." I nodded, smiling as I looked at him. "We are, one step at a time." And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could truly believe that. As the evening light fades and the soft hum of the world continues on, I sit back and reflect on how much has changed. What started as a house built on love, laughter, and hard work had become a battleground of misunderstandings, but through patience, respect, and a willingness to grow, we found our way back. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but sometimes the most beautiful things are the ones we rebuild brick by brick, moment by moment. To all of you watching, I hope this story has touched something deep within you. Whether you've been through similar struggles or you're just beginning your own journey of healing, remember, there's always hope. Sometimes we just need to take that first step toward forgiveness, toward understanding, and toward love. And when we do, that's when the real change begins. If you found yourself connected to this story, if you felt the emotions and lessons, I'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Where are you watching from? And what did this story mean to you? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you want to see more stories like this, stories that dive deep into real-life emotions and journeys, don't forget to hit that like button. It lets me know you're enjoying the content and it helps others find it too. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel and click that notification bell so you never miss another story. We're building a community here, one story at a time, and I'm so glad you're part of it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.